Does Israel have a right to the land of Israel or not? That is the question. Mike Huckabee and Tucker Carlson got deeply entrenched in this whole debate. Tucker Carlson wanted to discuss this with Mike Huckabee, and he actually went over to Israel to discuss this with our ambassador over there. And it got very heated at times. And I just want to remove all the bull, because a lot of people, when we get into this, it gets very just nuanced, very just in the weeds. And I wanted to kind of just take maybe a little bird's eye view, step back a little bit. Does Israel have a right to that land or not? And do other nations have a specific right to their own land? And where the hinge is specifically, is it a biblical right? We're going to take a look at a couple of different clips. And this is when Tucker he pushes back on Mike Huckabee. Well, does Ireland have a right to their land? Does England have a right to their land? And he starts throwing these examples, and let's see what Mike Huckabee says.
Do they have a moral right to that as their homeland?
And I think they would probably say, yes, we do, because we have ancient history to it.
What do you think?
I've never thought about whether
now that I'm raising the question, and you've spent a lot of time thinking about the right of the Jewish people to their homeland, do the Irish have the same right to a homeland?
As long as they can defend it, and as long as they,
as long as they can defend it.
But Tucker, here's the point.
Wait a second.
I'm telling you.
Wait, hold on. Now you just flipped category. You're the minister here.
Yeah, and I'm telling you.
As long as they can defend it. And if they can't defend it, they lose the right.
Allowing me to tell you that I think that what is very, very special here is that there is a biblical, as well as an ethnic, and a historical. So you can take any one, but if you add them all together, biblical, historical, and ethnic, you have a very strong case that the Jewish people are living in a land that is indigenous to them, that has been their historic homeland for 3,800 years.
You can repeat it as...
Obviously, he's a politician, so Mike Huckabee is saying the things, and when I really stepped back and thought about this, what Mike Huckabee is saying, because he brings up, does Israel have a right to exist? And because they got into the whole, well, who are Jews and do they have claim on this land? And I know he's given those answers, and that's the answers that Israel has tested and knows what's going to work, what's not, as well as just our politicians. They know what's going to work, what's going to not, to the mass audiences. I don't care about the mass audiences. I want to get to the heart of the matter. And what really matters at all is it a biblical right or not? I think it is a biblical right that Israel has to that land. I do think that that is the case. And the other nations don't. And it's not like that, because I hear all the time Nick Fuentes is saying that people that are Zionists, they worship Israel. I don't worship Israel at all. I worship the King of Israel, who is Jesus, but I don't worship Israel. But I do recognize that they do have a specific promise, a deed that God gave to them. If we're going to take any of the promises that God gives to us in the Bible and the words that he says, like, if we're going to take it as gospel, as truth, that God can't go back on it, he can't renege on things that he said. Like, if we're going to say that God says that if you put your trust in Jesus, your sins are forgiven, you'll go to heaven and you'll be with him forever. We take that as gospel. But when he makes a promise to Israel, we do some mental gymnastics to kind of rethink about, like, no, he couldn't really mean that. Either what God says is real or it's not. That's where I'm at. Let me know if you think different. All right, now this next clip is probably the one that got the most traction, because it got into the whole, say there is Israel, that the people that are still are that specific people, and how far does this reach? How much land did God give them? And what Mike Huckabee said is probably what a lot of people are thinking, but he just outright said it.
Ask, what land are you talking about? Because I just read Genesis 15, as I have many times. Mm-hmm. And that land, I think it says, from the Nile to the Euphrates, which is, once again, basically the entire Middle East. So God gave that land to his people, the Jews, or he didn't. You're saying he did. What does that mean? Does Israel have the right to that land? Because you're appealing to Genesis.
Yeah.
You're saying that's the original deed.
It would be fine if they took it all. But I don't think that's what we're talking about here today.
What would be?
He said it. And is he being just tongue in cheek? But I mean, Tucker knows he plays this game of being stupid, which he's not. He's very smart, but he knows how to interview. He knows how to play dumb so he can draw the most out of people. He's very good at that. So he knows what Mike is hinting at. He knows what everybody in the back of the mind. It brings me to the thing about like predestination. When people talk about predestination, we always say, well, what do you mean by predestination? When we all know what people mean by it, they just don't flat out say it. This is the same thing. Tucker knows what he's hinting at.
Fine. Well, it's exactly what we're talking about today.
But here's what I don't think
you think it would be fine if the state of Israel took over all of Jordan?
They don't want to take it over. They're not.
Mike Huckabee got back into the this screens. Right after that, it felt like Mike Huckabee thought he might have got himself into some hot water, which he has, and there has been ramifications from what he said because all the other Islamic countries surrounding Israel right now are obviously pushing back because they're like, what? You just said that they have a right to all of our land? I don't, the whole, well, how far does it extend, of that, the land that God promised to Israel back in Genesis and all that? How far does it reach? Really, that to me is not as big of a concern, because I think the hinge is, did he promise it or not? And I think he did. I'm actually pretty 100% certain he did. And I think that people that you can go the Nick Fuentes route and just say, well, all of that stuff is done away with. And he brings up, and he speaks of Yahweh, the God of Israel, the Hebrew God, like almost it's a separate thing. Like God was that way then, and Jesus came and he's completely different now, which if there's any consistency in God, he has to be the same being. He doesn't change. So how does he he becomes a completely new avatar in the New Testament, a new thing? That doesn't make sense. It doesn't line up. You can have that little cognitive dissonance moment and then just shuffle it away and say no, the God of Israel, he worked with the Jews. He made all these lying promises to them. And then when Jesus came, who is the King of the Jews, who is the King of Israel, that he forgets all of that and he just goes a completely different route. It's the same God, and the same God doesn't lie. The same God, if he promises something, it stands firm. It doesn't go backwards. It doesn't revert. It doesn't backtrack. God doesn't need to backtrack. And when he says something, it's done. So I do think there are more types and antitypes that fulfill these things, but it doesn't negate what he said to them and what he promised Abraham, what he gave to them and his descendants. And that's it didn't become like there was Jews in the Old Testament and all the way up until we get into the New Testament. When we get into the New Testament, the Apostle Paul makes it clear his one house rule for all the churches. And a lot of people don't recognize this, but in the New Testament, in Corinthians, he says, my house rule is that Jews remain Jews, Gentiles remain Gentiles. That means there's still a distinction. We're not all homogenized. It's not like when you trust in Jesus, if you're a female, that you somehow become a male, and if you're a male, you become a greater male, or we're all just one thing now. We're not absorbed into one thing. There's still distinctions. And this whole, with Israel, I know this can rub people the wrong way because I know this isn't the popular opinion. And I don't care about the popular opinion. I really don't, because I care about God's opinion, what God says. And I'm not going to just run with the crowd and just be a, what's that word? A grifter. I'm not going to be a grifter that just everybody hates Israel now. I got to hate Israel. Everybody wants to try to just discount Jews, make them nothing, go along with this a popular opinion and just say and try to remove their basic rights. Because it's not like the things that there is a difference between what we in the United States have to our land as opposed to Israel has to their land. I'm all for America. But when you get into divine covenants and divine promises, God didn't promise England that land or that people that land. He promised Israel and gave to Israel that specific land. And Mike Huckabee, he's just working it out, saying the inevitable conclusion of what we would all get to, that if God promised from the Nile to the Euphrates, and now all the whole landmass and how far that goes, I haven't dove into that specifically. I don't know exactly from here to here. And really, it doesn't matter. It was just a promise that they would have peace, specific as the natural descendants, the covenant community of God, that he would give them peace and rest in a land. And it does signify a greater rest that all people who trust in God will have, who trust in God through Jesus Christ will have, that we will have an eternal rest. This land, this earth is going to pass away, but it doesn't change the fact that we're still in the here and now, and what God promised to them still abides. And we see that throughout in the Old Testament, God said, if you're disobedient, I'm going to kick you out of the land, which they were the ultimate disobedient when they rejected their Messiah. They rejected him. They crucified him. And then God scattered them. God sent them throughout the entire world, but it says that he would bring them all back, which he is doing. And anyone that is opposing that, you are going against God. You are pushing against God. God will have the ultimate upper hand, and he's going to continue to work, and he's bringing his people back. But I wouldn't fight against God. It might be popular to say the things that go against God now, but really it's maybe not the best thing to do for your own personal soul and your personal well-being, to be pushing against what God promised and said. And I know this isn't popular. I obviously know that, and I don't care. Jesus said, woe to you when everybody speaks well of you. And when we get back to it, I'm not saying the things that just Israel loves. So everybody that says, oh, he's going for a $7,000 check, I wouldn't even know how to get a $7,000 check, and I don't care about that. And I'm not going to say the things that Israel because they want you to say everything for them. I'm going to be open and clear with what I believe. This is what I believe. And they're obviously not going to like the things that when I say, when I'm not touting the party line, not being completely diplomatic and being political like Mike Huckabee. He's saying the very nuanced, careful lines that Israel has, and I don't think he's not a puppet of Israel, definitely not. But he believes in, he stands for it. And I don't even myself agree with everything that Mike Huckabee believes. I'm probably even more extreme in certain degrees and different. And in the ways that I don't align with a lot of Christians. I think that when we try to remove these things and we try to make Jesus more palatable and more of our age, we're actually diminishing and discrediting Jesus. When we say that Jesus came away, he fulfilled the law, and that means he did away with all of it, we're actually creating a false Jesus when we say that. Jesus came, fulfilled the law. Jesus was a Torah observant Jew. Paul was a Torah observant Jew. Peter was a Torah observant Jew. They cared about the law, upholding the law. The whole question was, do Gentiles need to become Jewish? That was the question that they fought against in the New Testament. That was the issue at hand. That was the struggle, and that was why they had to have a convening council in Acts 15 to iron some things out. But they upheld the law, and I think a lot, and that's where I kind of disagree with a lot of Christians in saying that the law's been done away with. It hasn't, but it applies differently to Jews and Gentiles. It's not across the board. All right, so this isn't the biggest issue of everything. It's, when we get down to it, it's Jesus is the bottom line. So that's gonna kind of take off Jews today because they're not embracing him. But that's the truth. Gentiles, we have Christ right now. They have the law, and there's this barrier that people are putting up again that the apostles and Jesus tore down, and we're resurrecting them with our own false interpretations of the Word of God. So we'll leave it at that. Let me know what you think. Drop a comment. Let me know what you think of this show. Follow me on X and Instagram at Brandon Fogel, and have a great rest of your day.
I could see the cracks form in the paint, growing like a fire. What do I say? Can you see them?